What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is the podcast arm of Viri Christi. Viri Christi is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help young men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at verichristi.com. All right, fellas, this is the Intro to Moral Theology, Episode 5, okay? What we're going to talk about in this episode is what in the world does it mean to be made in the image of God? Now, to remind you guys what we talked about last month. Last month, we talked about the difference between ethics and moral theology. That's going to reemerge in today's podcast a little bit. We talked about the sources, right? So when we're trying to learn how to live moral lives, where do we get our information from? We can get it from faith and reason. We talked about that a little bit. And then we finally looked at moral relativism. Okay, is morality different for everyone depending on where they live or who they are? Or are there some moral laws that are true for everyone, everywhere, all the time? Which is the position which I defended. All right. This month, we're going to look at what is the nature of the human person. Okay. The reason why we have to look at that. Moral theology is all about turning you into the man God wants you to be. In order to do that, we have to have a clear idea of what you are. Okay. You can't perfect something, or you can't make something better, or you can't take care of something unless you know what it is. So if I asked you guys, hey, could you, I'm going out of town. Could you stay at my place and take care of my animals? Your first question would be, well, what kind of animals do you have? The reason why you would ask that wisely is whatever kind of animal I have will determine what you have to do for it. Okay. Because the nature of something determines how you have to take care of it. Okay. So if I have a house dog, right? You guys might be like, yeah, I'll watch your house. No problem, right? You feed the dog, take him for a walk, throw him the ball, everything's done. But if I told you I had a pack of wolves, okay, you might be less hesitant, or you might be more hesitant to not do that. Or if I said you have to take care of a horse, you might not want to do it, because what a thing is determines how you take care of it. Same thing's true in morality. When you're trying to make a human being into what God wants them to be, you have an idea of what they are so that you know what will actually make them better and what will make them worse. And so what we're going to talk about this month is just that. And we're going to do this in 4 steps, as usual. We're going to talk about what it means to be made in the image of God today. Next week, we're going to talk about the faculties of the soul. So once we have an idea of what a human being is, we're going to say, okay, what powers come with that? Because we want to perfect those powers and appetites. That's next week. Then we're going to talk about what was it like for Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So what was God's original intention with us? And then we're going to wrap up this month by saying what went wrong before we get to the how to correct it. So that's the plan for the month. All right, let's just go ahead and jump in. I'm going to spend the next few minutes rehashing an episode that we did in the Rule of Life. So it's Rule of Life episode 2 on what is man. Now, I want you guys to know, occasionally I we'll kind of go back to topics we've talked about in the past. And the reason why I do that is not because I'm going nuts and forgetting what I'm doing. It's important. Studying theology is like lifting weights, right? You need repetitions and lots of them to get strong. So a lot of times what I'm going to do is I'll return to a theme we did before, rehash it, and then deepen our view a little bit. And so as we do that, and as you guys get those repetitions, you'll start to learn the content better and hold on to it, okay? So we're going to start with an overview of what we said then, and then we're going to expand our knowledge, okay? So, and if you want to read a longer version of this, just go back to Rule of Life episode 2, and you guys can listen to that. All right. When we talk about what man is, we want to avoid 2 extremes. The first extreme, and these are both reductionistic, okay? The first extreme is some people want to reduce what a human being is merely to his soul. They want to say, I am my soul, okay? Other people you'll meet will say they want to reduce a human being to his body. These are both false. So if someone says, I am my body, if they say, I'm nothing but a product of evolution and I'm just my body, that's false. That's reducing a human being to just his body. If someone else comes in and goes, well, the body's irrelevant, it doesn't make any sense, what you are is your soul, that's false too. The proper understanding of what a human being is we are what's called a soul-body composite, okay? Which means we have this body, this physical thing right here that we have in common with other animals, right? We have teeth and flesh and blood and hair and skin and all that sort of stuff. We have that stuff in common with animals. But what makes this physical body thing a human body is my soul. Okay. So when you say, well, who are you? Okay. I'm Mr. Mason. What are you? I'm human. What is a human? It is a soul body composite. Okay. It's a soul. It's a body that's ensouled. Okay. Or filled with a soul. So I can't say I'm just my body. I can't say I'm just my soul. I'm a soul body composite. Right. Now the soul and the body are distinct from each other, but they're not, it wouldn't be proper to say they're different. Okay. They are distinct. So when the body dies, the soul is going to leave and go up to heaven. But sooner or later, God's going to reunite the two because what we are ensouled bodies. Make sense? Okay, so that's what a man is. We have a soul and body. Now, what we're going to talk about next week is what sort of powers, what sort of appetites come with that so that we can perfect those things and become the men God wants us to be. So that's where we're going, right? But what I want to talk about with our last few minutes in this episode is what does it mean to be made in the image of God then? Okay. Now, there's a threefold progression in being made in God's image. Okay, there's threefold. It's called the natural image of God, what's called the image of grace, and the image of glory. Okay, so when I say human beings are made in God's image, there's three ways to understand that. First, and this is not difficult, so hang in there because it's not that tough. First is what's called the natural image of God. The natural image of God is the image that every single human being on planet Earth at any time has, okay? It is the way in which we reflect God's nature naturally. That's our ability to reason, our ability to choose, our ability to love, our ability to think about God and the world around us and ourselves, just using philosophy and reason. And it's what we talked about last month is what ethics has to do with. So ethics explores the natural image of God. You do ethics with the natural image. Now, that's not the only image that you can have access to. For most of you, especially you guys raised in Catholic homes, what happened to you, a few days, a few weeks, a month after you were born? You were baptized. When you were baptized, grace was infused into your soul and it gave you an increased image of God. So God's image then was in you in a new way. You still had the natural image that didn't go anywhere, but God's now dwelling in you in friendship, right? You have a loving relationship with him. That's called the image of grace. This is the supernatural, not the natural, the supernatural image of God that's impressed upon the soul through baptism and through the sacraments and such. Okay. We want to stay in that image of grace throughout the remainder of our lives and to grow in it. The image of grace has to do with moral theology. So remember last month we said ethics and moral theology are not identical to each other. Ethics has to do with the natural image of God. The image, moral theology has to do with the supernatural image of God. It's called the image of grace. Make sense? And we want to stay in that grace image. A lot of our moral theology, we're going to talk about how do you stay in that and how do you grow in it. Finally, if you die in a state of grace and you go to heaven, God's going to dwell in you in a new way. Okay. And that is what's called the image of glory. This is when you will see God face to face. It's the fullest state of being in God's image. All right. Guys, what moral theology is about is helping you pass through these three phases successfully. At least you pass through the first two, okay? So this progressive character of the Christian life, we need to keep making progress. Here's a theme we're going to talk about a whole bunch. Whether we're talking about human beings biologically, morally, or spiritually, there's three phases of development. Biologically, you're a child, then you're an adolescent, and then you're an adult, okay? Morally speaking, you're in what's called the stage of the disciple. That's like moral childhood. Then you make progress, which is like moral adolescence. And then you finally get what's called perfection and freedom, which is moral excellence or moral adulthood. Spiritually speaking, you ascend through the purgative way, which is the beginning of the spiritual life, up through the illuminative way, which is like the adolescence, teenage years of spirituality, and then the unitive way of full adulthood. Guys, biologically, morally, and spiritually, we progress through these developments. We are going to talk about this a lot on this podcast. If you wanted to summarize, this is what this podcast is all about, is how to get on this path, stay on this path, and make progress on this path. And it's super cool stuff. But we are butting up against the end of our time together, so let's stop there. We'll revisit this more and unpack the implications next week. So hope you guys have an awesome week. See you next time. God bless.